Good evening, and welcome to Conversations Live Diet and Nutrition. I'm Carolyn Donaldson. It's no secret that with the holiday season we've just come through and these frigid temperatures we're having, it can be a challenging time to maintain a healthy diet during the winter months. Tonight, our guests discuss ways to prevent gaining that dreaded winter weight. We'll also get their nutrition tips for eating healthy in this new year. They'll also take your questions. Now, let's meet our guests. Kathleen Keller is an associate professor with the Department of Nutritional and Food Sciences at Penn State's College of Health and Human Development. Her work focuses on childhood obesity and how eating behaviors develop in children. Dr. Virginia Wray is a bariatric medicine specialist at Mount Nittany Physician Group. She specializes in obesity medicine and nutrition support. Thank you both so much for being with us tonight. And you can join tonight's conversation. Our toll-free number is 1-800-543-8242. And our email address is connect@wpsu.org. You may also tweet your question or comment using hashtag WPSU Conversations. We'll be monitoring all three, and we'd love to hear from you. So let's begin this conversation. First of all, again, thanks so much for joining us tonight. And let's start with a look at the winter months and being a little more sedentary and having that comfort food come into play. Through your research and through your practice, do you see an uptick in behavior changes or in people coming to you or in your research work?
I will take that question first. I think a lot of people want to make changes in the new year. It's a logical time. People are motivated. So, of course, you know, we see a lot of people coming to us for questions. They're frustrated. They want to know how to maintain a healthy life in the new year. And this goes for adults, but also the children in their lives. They also pick up on that. So, you know, it's certainly a time that we get a lot of questions and a lot of people are trying to make changes that are going to be sustainable. And so I think, you know, for everyone, it's difficult to maintain those changes, but it's a good time to look at the new year and see what positive changes you can make.
Good. And Virginia?
We definitely capitalize on that New Year motivation to a time to reflect about what you want out of the coming year and what your goals are. And but it is a difficult time. They're coming off of the holidays unhappy with some food choices that they made, and it's cold. They don't want to do their normal activity. Joints are achy. So it's a hard time to start that exercise program. Maybe they'll join the gym, but they're not wanting to go out into the cold and it's dark. But the days are getting lighter, and there's hope on the horizon.
Oh, great. Let's take a look at your special practice and your research and just delve a little bit closer into, let's start with bariatric medicine and obesity medicine. In this region, it's fairly new. You're on board with the Mount Nittany Physician Group. And can you describe a little bit about what your practice entails?
Yes, obesity medicine is a fairly new medical specialty and certification program. There's a lot of diversity in how different practices, what their focus is. Some facilities are led by bariatric surgeons and have a very surgical approach. I'm coming from the medical approach. I have 10 years of family medicine, and what I found is if I could help people lose 5, 10, 15 pounds, 5 things got better: their blood sugars, their blood pressures, their pain, their mood. So I did a fellowship in bariatric medicine and then came back to practice that exclusively because it takes a lot of time and energy.
Very interesting. We'll talk more about the multidisciplinary approach and who you bring in to work with some of your patients. How about your research? Fascinating, the behavior, the study of behaviors, and especially starting with children. It all begins there, right?
Well, that was really what motivated me to study children, is that I really want to prevent eating behaviors and overeating from developing in adults, because once people get to adulthood, it's a little bit more difficult to make changes, as most people can attest to. So what we're really interested in our lab is studying how eating behaviors develop in childhood And we actually do a fair amount of studying on the brain, how children respond to food cues like portion size and energy, of content of foods, as well as food advertising and food commercials. So we're also interested in how to make school lunches healthier. So we've been doing some work with the local schools to make school lunch vegetables taste better. So we have a couple different approaches that we use, some in the laboratory and also some that are in the community, to try to understand how to make people adopt better eating patterns and eat healthier diets. So it's really rewarding work because we get to work with children who are just a delight to work with, and also get to work with people at a time when they're really learning about diet and eating behaviors.
Great. We'll talk more about how your research is reaching out, too, to hopefully impact some change, positive change. You're described, Dr. Wray, as the great motivator and a favorite among patients. Now, if I were coming to you with some obesity issues, I'm not sure I'd want to see you in the first place. But so how do you attract some of the patients and to talk to them seriously about, making changes in their lifestyle, in their eating habits, in their nutrition, in their diet?
Most of my patients are referred from their primary care physician.
Okay.
So I develop rapport and good communication with our local primary care, pediatrics, internal medicine, family medicine, but also word of mouth. People don't know what to expect, and often they're coming in expecting some restrictive diet, and that's really not what we're talking about. So the word of mouth gets out that it's not what you think, and you're gonna really enjoy the visit and learn a lot.
Very interesting. We've got looks like an email that came in, so let's take that from Michael, who writes, how important is when I eat? So these are specific questions. This is great, audience. Should I eat breakfast? Will eating at night make me fat? These are all things that are milling about and trying to find the answer. Who wants to take that first?
This is something that we've looked at quite a bit, and so the research on breakfast eating is generally correlational. People who tend to eat breakfast have better weight management, but that's not to say it's causal. So if you're not a breakfast eater, there's no reason for you to force yourself to eat breakfast, because that research has generally not shown it to be protective against obesity. So don't force yourself if you're not a breakfast eater. If you naturally eat breakfast and that's a way you maintain your weight, that's perfectly fine. The other part of the question that was asked is also very important, and a lot of people think if they eat at night, that weight is going to stay in their bodies, and that's somehow worse than eating other times during the day. And again, the research there has generally shown that if you're maintaining calorie balance, it doesn't necessarily matter if you're eating calories at night versus during the day. And that is a myth that a lot of people have, that if they eat at night, that weight is going to somehow stay on their body more than if they eat at other times during the day. I will say, though, that sometimes there are people who eat at night who tend to graze after dinner. And they actually call these people night eaters. And they don't eat a lot of calories during the day, but once dinner hits, they tend to snack. And so if you're the type of person that notices yourself mindlessly snacking in front of your favorite TV shows and eating more than you intended, you might want to monitor that. But in general, it's not going to hurt you if you're in calorie balance to eat more of your calories at night, or there's no reason necessarily to eat breakfast if you're not a person who generally eats breakfast on a typical basis.
Dr. Wray?
Well, I do disagree with that pattern of behavior, because what happens is when someone doesn't eat breakfast, they don't have their typical hunger cues for lunch. By the time they get to evening eating, they are they're tired, they're hungry, they're consuming higher carbohydrate foods. And what we see is when people don't eat breakfast and lunch, they tend to eat larger carbohydrate foods towards the end of the day. But you need to meet your basic needs as a human being. You have certain protein needs. We know you need at least 5 a day of your fruits and vegetables. If you're skipping a meal, the likelihood of you getting that and starting your day with the proper fuel, your body's got work to do. You don't store protein in your GI tract very long. So it's very important once you're up and moving to get a good source of protein in the morning. And then you'll notice your natural hunger cues at lunch. If you skip breakfast, you can often go all day without eating because you don't feel hungry, because you're not getting those hunger cues because you're not breaking that basal metabolism overnight with a meal. So eating breakfast is going to give you a chance to get the protein, fruits and vegetables that you need, the proper grains. When you're in a better frame of mind to be thinking and planning your day, you're going to get your natural hunger cues for lunch. So I'm a big fan of breakfast, lunch, and supper. I call it BLS, basic life support. And when people are doing that and eating according to the plate method of portion control, I'm not seeing the same kind of problems with the nighttime eating, where people are eating in front of the television, and what are they eating? Carbohydrate-based foods, you know, chips, sweet, salty combination of foods. They're eating distracted. They go to the kitchen, don't even know what they want because they weren't paying attention. And I'm seeing that when they're not getting their breakfast, lunch, and supper, you know, that nighttime eating behavior is not as intelligent as the eating behaviors that are happening through the day.
How does your practice differ from like a nutritionist? And do you bring a nutritionist into it, or a registered dietitian into what you do with your patient load?
That is a great question. So being a physician, especially with my family medicine background, the very first visit, it's a long visit, they're with me at least an hour, and I take a comprehensive medical history. I look at all their medications they're taking, their surgical history. I get a dietary history. I do a physical exam. I check their airway, check thyroid, look for swelling in the legs, listen to heart and lungs. So they're getting the benefit of a comprehensive medical exam. And I'm also in touch with their PCP. They're sending me, if they're within Mount Nittany, we've got the computer system, but if they're outside, they're great about sending me information and labs so I can look at the whole picture and find out what kind of medical obstacles, medication obstacles that they're having to being successful with their weight loss. And then once we've developed a plan and we're working on eating behaviors, that's a great time to bring in a registered dietitian or an exercise therapist to help them start meeting those goals that we made. But I need to identify those obstacles medically.
Good point. We're going to keep moving on because we're getting some good feedback here from our viewers. We appreciate that. Anne has sent an email in and writes, don't cortisol levels go up when you're stressed? Can this cause weight gain even if you don't eat anymore or exercise less than you have been before? That's a pretty, no, I'm not sure I understand. You might have to explain cortisol levels, first of all. I don't know, Dr. Wray?
Yeah, your cortisol levels do vary through your day.
Okay.
You know, when you are sleeping at night, you have your lower cortisol levels, higher melatonin levels. And as the sun starts to come up and melatonin falls and cortisol rises, you're gearing up for the day, which is why I want people to eat breakfast so they can fuel, you know, their metabolic response there. So cortisol, you have normal cortisol that's released during times of stress. The problem is when stress is prolonged and increased and occurring on a daily basis. There are healthy stressors and there are unhealthy stressors. And our culture is facing a lot of unhealthy stress. So you get these cortisol levels, and what they do is they tend to drive your fat storage towards your core, around the middle area. And you'll see that the core gets heavier and the limbs and actually get smaller, and as we lose muscle mass and get more, and that fat that accumulates around the middle can get in around the organs. We call it visceral fat, and interfere with things like glucose metabolism, blood pressure. It'd be a risk factor for heart disease. Now, there's a lot of things that can help with that cortisol stress. Physical activity releases endorphins, which are more potent to help undo some of those stress of your day. Taking time away to breathe and to eat and to take a walk at lunch, you know, can really help you with those cortisol levels. But those are normal responses to stress. But when the stress becomes abnormal, that's when you're going to get, you know, those cortisol impacts over time.
And how about your research? Do you study that as part of the whole behavioral programs?
It's something we're actually getting more into because we realized how, you know, important it is, as Dr. Wray was mentioning. It's something that affects children, it affects adults, and our lifestyle is very stressful. You know, people are under all kinds of stress from, you know, professional lives and personal lives and the environment and the internet and all kinds of different stresses we face. And there are people who eat in response to stress, who that's their sort of natural reaction, and part of that is related to cortisol. And so there are a lot of reasons why, stress is a fundamental component of how healthy you are, and so it's something that we've started to look at recently.
All right. Another email. Kim writes, Dr. Wray's wonderful and has helped me so much with losing weight. I'm wondering about nut milk, that is the cashew and the almond milks. Of course, they're very popular right now, versus dairy milk. Is any better or worse? So we're looking at products now specifically.
Yes. Well, the cow's milk has more protein generally. If you look at your typical almond milk, it'll have about 1 gram of protein. And I find, especially with many women, are not getting enough protein through their day, especially as they get older. There tends to be a gravitation towards carbs, whether it's because they're easier to digest with a troubled GI tract, so I'm always looking what has the most amount of protein. So some of your nut milks do not have the protein that cow's milk has. Now, cow's milk is not an issue if you don't have a problem with it. But I tell people, if it bothers you, don't eat foods that upset your stomach or that you don't feel good with. But generally, your cow's milk is going to be cheaper and have a little more protein than some of your nut milks. But it's really a preference thing.
Let's look at the food industry. What do you certainly have researched all of that with the marketing and the branding and the popularity, I guess, of certain the food industry in general.
Right. In terms of dairy products?
Sure.
I think, in general, a lot of people avoid dairy products. And again, as Dr. Wray mentioned, there's no reason to do that unless you have a problem with them. So certainly low-fat dairy products incorporated into your diet can be a great source of protein, a great source of calcium. But right now we're at a huge trend in our culture where people are also sort of adopting vegan diets, adopting paleo diets, and so there's more people who are interested in alternative sources of protein, and they can also be incorporated into a healthy diet, but again, don't feel obligated if that you have to have those as sources of your diet, because they can be more expensive, and they sometimes can interfere with metabolism of other nutrients. So, so it's nothing to be concerned about incorporating dairy in your diet, but these other products can be good sources of protein as well.
Okay. I have to ask this because I'm always one saying I'm trying to beat my genes. I'm trying to beat, the genetic background that I have, and we talk about the behaviors certainly, but also the genetic. Are you finding, people come to you and say, I'm this way, it's who I am, it's who all of my family has been, and I won't be able to change that? Is that, obesity?
The genetic component is fascinating research. We're finding more and more genetic components, discovering more and more genes. And the very interesting thing about obesity genes, and there's been over 100 isolated, specifically named, they can be turned off or on with lifestyle. The genes become expressed when combined with lifestyles that are unhealthy, where the gene wouldn't be expressed under those circumstances. So it's a combination. And I never want people to put themselves in a box and say, if they're saying can't, always, never, those are emotional lies that we have to put aside and know that you are capable of making a difference in how you're feeling, no matter what your genetics are. But genetics are very important.
Kathleen's nodding.
I mean, it is absolutely so important, but you do see people come to you who have had families that are always obese, and they have a high genetic load to obesity, but the environment, it's an environment and gene interaction. And so our environment now is what we call obesogenic. It has a lot of really tasty foods that have a lot of energy and they're easy to get, and those happen to just interact and turn on genes so that now we're seeing those genes expressed. So the genes are important, but the environment is also important, and so it's never one or the other. And so I never want people to throw in the towel, to give up and say that they can't live a healthy lifestyle, because wherever you're at, changing your environment, changing your diet can help you.
And actually, this kind of ties in. This email from Mina says, if you do everything right with dieting and you still do not lose weight, what more can you do? Does it have to do, now she adds, with age or genetics?
Oh, well, certainly there are obstacles that pregnancy. We know in pregnancy there are cells called preadipocytes that you can, adipocyte is the fat cell. And these preadipocytes, you can't even detect them. Pregnancy causes them to turn from pre-adipocytes to adipocytes, and they never turn back. So you actually get new fat cells when you become pregnant.
That's lovely.
Yeah, that can happen also during times of trauma, times of stress, after menopause. So there are things that make it difficult, and we can't expect, to weigh what we did when, before we got married or graduated from high school or whatever it is. But we certainly can make progress. We certainly can feel better. And that's always my goal, is to feel better. Losing weight is a desired side effect of you doing things to feel better. So your healthy goal weight is the weight you are when you're doing everything you can under the circumstances to take good care of you. So, and that includes having a healthy self-image, a healthy attitude. So there's a lot of things we talk about. But I've not met anyone, including myself, who's doing everything right. So there's always something that we can work on. So total honesty is really important as well.
I kind of want to throw out the word diet, because I think the way we use the word diet, especially after the new year, people tend to think of diet as a radical change and elimination. And just the perception of feeling like you can't have things, I think primes the brain for relapse, and it sets us up in a place where we're denying ourselves, and then we're overdoing it. And so I really, want people to get to a point where, they're maybe accepting of a weight that's 10 pounds over what they weighed when they were in high school, or maybe even a little bit more, but that they're eating intuitively and following their, their desires, but also letting them have a little bit of foods that they really want. But also just eating a variety of good foods. And so not sort of following the fad diet trend and really restricting themselves, because that only leads to failure in the long term, I think.
Part psychologist with all of this,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
I mean, do you bring in that specialty, or that's just part of what your bariatric obesity medicine kind of encompasses?
It's part of medical training.
Okay.
It's every specialty. There's always a counseling component, but very much so in weight management.
Okay. Let's look at what some of the most common misconceptions that we hear from patients and from those that you've done research on. Again, I guess I brought up the genetic option, but are there other misconceptions out there when you say the word diet? Of course, that's one. Anything else that is kind of used frequently as a catch-all, or as a kind of a fall factor? And well, I'm obese because of this, or I can't change because of this.
Well, I'm always facing the can't, always never mentality. I'm always trying to get people to understand they're capable of learning to do things differently.
At any age?
At any age.
At any size?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
And adult learners, returning students, make great learners. And we are always capable of learning and doing things differently if we don't put ourselves in a box and say, well, I have people rephrase when they say, I'm a stress eater. I say, no, you learned to do that. Don't put yourself in that box and label it. You can learn to do things differently. But probably the biggest misconception that I have is that weight loss must be fast. And that's the biggest problem, because that's restrictive dieting. Restrictive dieting doesn't work. Even calorie counting has not been shown to be effective in the long term. Calorie awareness, very much so, but not counting and restrictive dieting. People gain weight because what they're doing and what they need are not matching up. And most of the problem is they're not doing the things they need to meet their basic needs as a human being, which makes them vulnerable to the things they shouldn't be doing. So the focus is on treating yourself according to the needs of a human being and not restrictive dieting.
Okay. This ties in. Rob has sent an email in, and let's take a look at his. He says, I'm overweight and need to lose weight. Problem is, I've had heart disease for over 12 years. I've had 5 cardiac arrests and numerous heart surgeries, including bypass. Because of this, I'm not very active, and I exercise is almost impossible. I try to eat right, but nothing seems to work. How can someone in my situation who has a chronic illness lose weight? Dr. Wray, can you help us?
Well, the eating component is the biggest component of weight loss. And people put a lot of focus on physical activity. Physical activity is very important for weight loss maintenance, but not the major player when it comes to, especially initial weight loss. You can lose weight without increasing your physical activity. But we really have to look at, what someone had asked a question about, what should I be eating, when should I be eating? Eating according to the plate method of portion control. We are half herbivores. Half of your diet should be fruits and vegetables. Right? We should be eating lean proteins, and our grains should only be about a quarter of our plate. So one of the first things we need to do is have people keep records of what they're eating. We need to see it. I tell them, if you bite it, you write it. Write it down. You see it. We see it. And there's apps on phones that can tell you, what you're getting. And I'm looking more at the percentage of calories that are coming from those nutrients. And basic things are you drinking your calories? There's somewhere what you need and what you're doing aren't matching up. So that's where we need that comprehensive visit to try to figure out what's going on. Sometimes it's a medication problem. Sometimes changing a medication can bring a barrier down, but you need a comprehensive evaluation to look at the whole picture.
When we look at that plate, and you study food and work with food marketing companies, we have to make the good stuff even more palatable, right? We have to make it more exciting to eat those fruits and vegetables?
Yes, and I think a lot of people unfortunately learn habits early on, and they learn that they don't like vegetables. Unfortunately, I think, as Dr. Ray's mentioned, we can learn to like foods at any point in our life. It just so happens that, I study children because it's easier to learn these things during childhood. But I think as adults, particularly if we have children in the house, we can be modeling good behavior for them, and because that's part of the way that they learn to adopt good habits. And our brain can adapt to many different patterns. It just so happens that we're surrounded by really high calorie foods that are very tasty most of the time. So that's what our brain's really primed to crave. But you can unlearn those associations by, giving yourself opportunities to be surrounded by, good foods that are prepared in a really tasty way. You can make vegetables in a number of ways that are really, tasty and more palatable. And so I think, unfortunately, the way that Americans eat with the protein is sort of the typical Western diet, with the protein as the big source of the plate. We think that's the main part of the meal, and the vegetables are a little side dish. I think we need to change that up, and the My Plate method is really half of the plate, fruits and vegetables, and the proteins are a smaller portion. And I think we need to shift more to that style of eating.
And when we look at the childhood obesity numbers and where it's reached, in some reports, epidemic proportions, right, or nearing that. It's frightening to think that through your research, even though you're researching this, we're already pre-telling the next generation who will be seeing the Dr. Rays of the world, I guess, right, to try to change some of those behaviors.
Right, and in some estimates are expected to live a shorter lifespan than adults now if things don't change. And so I think that's why it's very important to focus on children, to focus on prevention. We can still make changes as adults, but prevention is critically important.
Okay. Another email. We're getting a lot of emails here tonight. So let's see. Louise writes, why do I never get hungry until 15 or 20 minutes after I eat? Just ignore the feeling, but when I do sit down to a meal, it tastes good. I enjoy eating, even though I don't feel hungry. So specific.
This is one of those questions where I would need to ask a lot of follow-up questions. How fast are you eating? What are you eating? There are certain foods, for example, high protein foods that tend to be a little more satisfying and make you feel a little bit more full. There's also a timing factor. So, once you're eating, it takes about 20 to 30 minutes or so to start to feel your fullness cues kick in. So there could be a number of reasons, what she's actually eating, how quickly she's eating, that might be related to how she's feeling. It could also be related to, what her body is sort of primed to expect. Our digestive system begins to release hormones even around the time that we expect to eat. So around lunchtime, if we typically eat at the same time during the day. So there are a lot of factors where I wish I had her on the phone that I could ask some follow-up
Louise, if
questions.
you can call in, that would be good. Dr. Wray?
Another thing is distracted eating. So many people eat distracted, whether it's the television or the computer or their phone or their tablet or a book or whatever it is. And tasting is conscious, and your hypothalamus has to receive those signals to biofeedback to other parts of your brain, to release, to tell your stomach to reduce the ghrelin and have your cells release leptin, which works as a meal ender. But if you're not paying attention, then you're going to end up with this head hunger that's insatiable because your body hasn't been able to make the connection. So everything needs to be off, and it's something we really work on is distracted eating, getting these kids back to the table. Right? It's good for everybody. It's good for the family. It's good for them. It's good for their future. But take a bite, put the fork down. So often, we've got a bite in our mouth and we're loading up the fork with the next bite before we've even chewed what's in there. It's like ready to go. And so to put the fork down, and if you can just enjoy your food, then you're sending that conscious message to your brain, and it's so important. That'll biofeedback to your whole body. But if you're not paying attention, then you're not going to get that. And the next thing you know, you're rooting around the kitchen. You don't even know what you want because your brain says, "You ate without me. Go get me some."
This all makes perfect sense. I mean, we're in this hurry-up world, and we don't take time for this. So this is work to be able to find that for your body. Then,
if you can actually take 10 minutes and eat your lunch at lunchtime without working in your computer, close the screen, put your screens down, and actually enjoy your food, you'll find you're a lot less vulnerable to those snacky things around the office.
We have a lot of international fellows from France who come and work in our lab, and they take lunch at a specific time, and they leave for an hour, and they think we are absolutely crazy for eating in front of our computers. You know, I have my lunch here, and I'm typing, and I'm working, and I know that's an awful pattern to have. It's so much more sensible to have a meal, to eat with other people, to talk, to focus on what you're eating. And it's just not the way our society does things. And I think it's a major mistake.
Very interesting. We'll keep discussing this, but let's just reintroduce, if you're just joining us, this is Conversations Live, Diet and Nutrition here on WPSU. Our guests tonight are Dr. Kathleen Keller, an associate professor with the Department of Nutritional and Food Sciences at Penn State's College of Health and Human Development, and Dr. Virginia Wray, a bariatric medicine specialist at Mount Nittany Physician Group. Our telephone number, and we'd love to hear from you on the phone because our doctors might have some follow-up questions, 1-800-543-8242. And our panel is ready to take your phone call. You can also email us again at connect@wpsu.org. So as we continue this, so we look at different cultures then, and we were just talking about a different culture and their lifestyle of eating. And we see the obesity numbers side with that, right, Dr. Keller?
I mean, there's such a cultural influence. The other aspect of our culture that's really distinctly American is portion size. And that's another thing that I think not only just portion size, but also the sweetness of our foods. And those are two of the things that I hear people comment on when they come from other countries. They're just not used to it. We put sugar in everything, in white bread, white sandwich bread, toothpaste, other types of products that you wouldn't expect sweetener to be, and we just expect everything to have this baseline level of sweet. So we get accustomed to that. And then also large portions of food. When you go to a restaurant, people come to expect getting a large portion, large enough for really
for value,
that supplies
or whatever, right.
most of your calories for the day. And it's really difficult to adjust people the other way because portion sizes have increased over the past 40 years enormously.
There's Fred writing in an email question here real quickly. What and when should I eat around my workouts? So combining the exercise with the diet and nutrition. Is there a formula for that as well, based on metabolism and
So there's a lot of research on issues such as nutrient timing. And it's in the sports medicine field.
Okay.
So if you're really into sports, you can get potentially a little bit of advantage, for example, by eating after your workout a higher protein but also higher carbohydrate meal to replace your glycogen, your carbohydrate stores that you've lost if you've really exerted yourself. But to also get a little bit of protein so that you start to rebuild your skeletal muscle mass. And then, before your workout, kind of eating something that has a little bit more what we call glycemic index, supplies some carbohydrates to you that you might need during your workout. If you're the type of person that isn't really into sports but just wants to be physically active for health, you don't need to worry about those things so much. You know, it's more about eating to supply yourself with the energy you need to work out. Eating a bagel with peanut butter before a workout is great, something with a little carbohydrate and protein. But in terms of the timing after the workout, you know, refilling your stores is good, but it's not going to give you that much of an advantage. I think just movement is important, and eating things that are balanced and that make you feel good during your workout and give you the energy that you need.
Do you find lifestyle changes for some of your patients, you know, is critical when you look at adding exercise as part of the diet and nutrition factor, maybe for...
People ask me, when is the best time to exercise? And I've got the perfect answer to that. The very best time to exercise is when you'll do it. If you're not a morning person, don't try to exercise in the morning.
Okay.
You know, there's benefits to doing it in the morning. There's also benefits to undoing that cortisol from your stress of your day and going for a walk and releasing some endorphins after work, and your family is going to be a lot happier when you come home with a smile on your face.
Right.
But as far as eating and exercise, it depends on how long and exertional your workout is. If people want to go for a walk first thing in the morning, I have some folks who roll out of bed, right onto their treadmill or right out the door and walk. Then you don't have to worry about eating immediately. But then within that hour, you want to be making sure you're getting a balanced, really good breakfast. Now, if you're going to do a workout another time of the day, then we want to have you have some carbohydrates before your workout, say maybe a banana and some peanut butter. You do your workout and then make sure maybe then after that you're ready for your meal like lunch. But you definitely want a good protein source, because when you are, especially if you're weightlifting, the way you rebuild muscles is to tear them down and rebuild. And then you need your protein to be able to rebuild those muscles.
Okay. We have a phone call, so let's hear from Virginia from State College. Virginia, you're on with our doctors. Virginia, do you have a question for our doctors tonight?
Yes, I'm wondering, are there programs for like 11, 12-year-olds? A friend of mine about 20 years ago in downstate New York, her daughter entered a one-on-one with a nutritionist who taught her, I guess it would be basically how to control portion size. She didn't, she was taught that she could have chips, she could be a normal preteen and teen, teaching habits where she could live in the world as a normal teen, however, but teaching her how to manage it. And the young woman did phenomenally well. Do we have anything like that?
Dr. Keller?
That's a great question, Virginia. I think I've had a couple parents email me about similar types of questions. And I don't know of any programs specifically like that in the area. I don't know if you know of any clinical programs like that, Dr. Wray, but I think what Virginia is talking about is really sensible. You know, the fact that you can have all kinds of different foods incorporated into your diet, but portion control is critical. And, you know, learning how to sort of balance your portions of different foods can make you feel not deprived. You don't have to give up the foods that you really love, but you can incorporate them into a balanced diet. And, you know, I wish we had, you know, I wish I knew of more programs offhand, because I think we really need those, particularly for children about that age, 11, 12, right before they're entering adolescence, because things begin to change at adolescence, and it's a critical, what we call a critical period, when, you know, people begin to put on weight who are susceptible to it because they change with all of the hormones with puberty.
Makes sense.
I know a lot of our registered dietitians, you know, do see children. I'm not aware of a specific program. I know our pediatric group, you know, has an obesity program that they're working on for their patients. But as far as the general public, I know our registered dietitians are often underutilized, and referrals can be made to them, and they work with children. And regarding kids and junk food, you know, it's very important to engage the parents, because I tell folks, nothing's forbidden, just don't keep it in the house. It can't be in the house. And if you go to a party and you want a handful of chips, great, but you can't expect it's going to be there in the cupboard or sitting on the counter and you're going to have willpower. Willpower is a mirage. When you get up to it, it's gone, right? So we can't have that stuff around. It's not forbidden, but it should be special, not a staple. It shouldn't be in the cupboard all the time.
Good point.
And, you know, just to add on to that, when you're making changes in the household, everybody has to make the change. I've had a lot of, you know, parents come up to me and ask me, you know, why their children don't eat vegetables, you know, or why they, you know, like certain types of foods that we call junk foods. And then you talk to the parents and you find out, well, they don't like vegetables, and they, you know, eat in front of the TV. And, you know, your children learn from you. So unless the whole family makes the change, it's not going to work for one member.
Right. I've had parents hide their soda in the bedroom. You know, that's not, I mean, if it's not good for the kid, it's not good for you either. So, you know, we definitely need the buy-in from the whole family.
How important is it to look at all the labels that we have today? And, you know, are you one who helps with your patients and your research, taking a look and breaking down those? Or do you just tell people to walk the perimeter of these grocery stores today and only get, you know, I've heard that theory, you know, never go down the aisles, just go for the fresh stuff and the things that you can find on the perimeter of grocery stores? Is that a factor in today's diet and nutrition?
The sugar infestation, you know, especially in folks drinking their sugar, unbelievable. We're not built just to receive sugar like that. If you look at a baked potato, there's only 1 gram of sugar in a baked potato. We're built to make sugar from those healthy carbohydrates. So to dump sugar down the hatch, we know it's inflammatory. So when you look at, in our whole 1.5 gallons of blood that we circulate about 1 teaspoon of sugar. Without it, we're dead. 2 teaspoons, we have diabetes. So that when you look at 1 teaspoon of sugar is 4 grams of sugar.
Wow.
Right? So you look at a soda that has 35 or 40 grams of sugar, that's 10 teaspoons of sugar that they're guzzling. That's inflammatory. The insulin levels are soaring, the body's stressing to get that out of the bloodstream, and where's it gonna put it? You know, into the fat cells. You know, we've got to stop the sugar infestation.
Okay.
And I think that's a huge factor is what everybody's drinking. And it's in the coffees too.
All right, let's get to another question. We've got Rosemary from Altoona on the phone. Let's hear from Rosemary. Your question for our doctors tonight, Rosemary.
Hi, yes, thank you, Carolyn. I've read a lot of books about nutrition by doctors, and I've seen in several of these books, they talk about all the toxins in the environment, and also all the additives in the food, like you were just saying about shopping the perimeter of the store to avoid that. And is it true, like, will these toxins and also certain, like the environmental toxins and also all these artificial stuff in our food, does that actually, you know, stick to us and cause us to gain weight or prevent us from losing weight? What the book I'm thinking of is actually one of the main ones was I saw right here on WPSU. Brenda, I can't think of her last name right now, but she does a lot of the detox, you know, talks about the detox diet.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Rosemary. We'll have the doctors address that.
So, yeah, thanks, Rosemary, for your question. It's a complicated question because there's ongoing research. We don't quite know a lot about everything in our food supply. And I will say that there's a lot of research and books that are coming out that the evidence isn't quite there. So I don't want people to be so worried about all the different additives and things in their food because we have little bits of evidence, but you know, it's the story's, you know, not fully there yet. There are some, you know, some research in terms of some of the environmental exposures that we have to things that can be stored in our fat that are hormone based, and there is some research that, you know, again is emerging about how that can, you know, be really related to weight gain. But again, it's, you know, it's newer research. In terms of these detox diets, a lot of them are not entirely science based because our liver, if it's working appropriately, can detoxify things. It's not to say we should just be throwing everything in our body and throwing caution to the wind, but our liver, if it's healthy, will be able to get a lot of, you know, toxicants out of our foods. And so it's, you know, it's a complicated issue. I think it's an issue that people should be aware of, but I don't think it's an issue where people should be, you know, worried to eat whole groups of foods because of that. And I don't know if you have a different opinion on that. It's a difficult question.
The body is a great detoxer. Right, but you got to give it the tools to detox. Okay. You know, imagine getting your house clean with very little water. You know, water is the best detoxer. So we've got to be drinking lots of water through the day. And if we knew what was in the air we were breathing, we'd be afraid to take that deep breath. I mean, our bodies are good at detoxing, but we certainly want to avoid things we know are known carcinogens.
Okay. Tracy has written an email to us. Let's get to Tracy here. I try to eat a balanced diet, but I know I don't achieve it most days. So she's already got the awareness here. So can daily use of vitamins and supplements help? That's something we didn't touch on yet. Dr. Wray or Dr. Keller?
I generally don't recommend supplements to people for a variety of reasons unless they have a known deficiency. If you don't have a very good diet, I don't want supplements to become an excuse for people not to eat a good diet, because we know it's better if you get your nutrients from food for a number of reasons. When people start to rely on supplements, it's very easy to overdo it with some nutrients, and those can interact with other nutrients and actually have negative effects. And we also know from the research, most of which the research that has used supplements, the effects have actually not been that positive. They've either been no effects, or in some cases, they've actually had negative effects. So I don't think anybody's going to be harmed by taking a multivitamin supplement, but when people start to take individual nutrient supplements plus a multivitamin supplement plus fortified foods, then they actually run the risk of overdoing it. And we know that if you get too much of nutrients, that's not good either.
If you're eating 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, fresh or frozen being your most nutrient rich, you probably don't need a multivitamin. But if you're not getting 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, I do recommend a good, just regular multivitamin, because there are nutritional deficiencies that can be developed if you're not getting the things you need every day.
Okay. Let me ask this for practical purposes, because we've got about 10 minutes left now in the program. So what are specifically perhaps some small baby steps or first things that viewers can do that maybe have been listening here and they're in, again, the middle of our winter blues, let's say, and it's still cold and it's hard to change our comfort food habits. So what can they do starting tomorrow to start moving towards that healthier weight and that healthier lifestyle? That can be big, I realize. I'm sorry, I'm asking a loaded question here, but
one of my simple rules is count your colors. Not count your Skittles, not colors of the rainbow, but count your colors of whole foods, fruits and vegetables. Okay. I give this advice to my toddler. I have a 2-year-old, Sam, if you're watching, hello. He, is picky, like children are. Sure. But we try to get as many colors as we can at a meal, and that ensures that we eat a variety of fruits and vegetables. So I think as a simple step, try to get as many colors of natural whole foods in your diet as you can. And, again, I stop the fad dieting. I think you have to quit the perceived sort of restriction and get back to a more intuitive way of eating.
You need to meet your basic needs as a human being. So number 1, tonight, turn the TV off after the show's done and go to bed.
Sleep. Sleep. Yes.
Yes, sleep. Number 1. I have what I call 4 pillars of metabolism. Number 1 is sleep. And studies show that people who don't get enough sleep are more prone to high caloric foods, more high calorie dense foods. They want that caffeine, they want that sugar because they're not getting enough sleep. Sleep is critical to metabolism. So we need 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And we need to make sure that if you're watching screens right up until bedtime, that light is going to suppress your melatonin. It's going to disrupt your sleep cycle. And we don't want alcohol before bed. A lot of people use that to go to sleep. We know it disrupts the sleep cycle. So good sleep hygiene, getting enough sleep, drink water. Every other beverage must be water. If someone's only drinking soda at this point, I try to get them every other water. That's going to cut your soda by half, but what you're focusing on is drinking the water. We need some kind of physical activity. I tell people, if you have a hamster, you put a wheel in the cage. We're built to move. We sit too much. So even if it's a 5-minute walk at lunch, practice more steps. And that nutrition, the proteins you need, the fruits and vegetables you need. If you've got that half a plate of fruits and vegetables and you've got your protein on your plate, then you've only got a quarter left for that spaghetti. So trying to eat according to that plate method.
Interesting, very interesting. More emails coming in. We want to get to as many as we can here with the minutes we have left. Lori's writing, I've got a question about stress and cortisol again. I've read that eating raw broccoli is effective in reducing levels of cortisol in your body. Is this true?
I've not seen a study on that. Have you seen a study on that?
I doubt that. That seems pretty doubtful.
Like causal that,
yes,
that
yeah.
raw broccoli would...
I can't think of any reason why those
Eat your
would be
broccoli
really
any way you
it's
like
good
it.
For you. It's good for you.
Yeah.
It is a color that we need to encourage.
Wonderful. It's got calcium, it's got iron, it's got all kinds of nutrients and antioxidants. So eat it any way you like it. Some people who have digestive problems are better off cooking their broccoli. Either way you do it, again, fresh or frozen is your best way to get your vegetables.
You roast it with a little olive oil, a hot oven. It's
really good with garlic, fresh garlic, stir-fried.
Wow. See, these guys have been there. And Sam probably loves it that way, probably, right?
I wish.
Working on that. Eleanor writes to us, how does an individual determine a healthy range of caloric intake? Not necessarily for weight loss, but for what is often called maintenance. The concept of calorie awareness seems especially helpful. So we're looking at, taking it from that vantage point instead of, the caloric intake. Dr. Wray or Dr. Keller?
Calorie maintenance is difficult. It's really challenging for people, particularly if you've lost weight. But one thing that you probably need to do, there are lots of sources online for you to plug in some simple numbers on your weight and your age, and you can figure out the amount of calories you need per day. You can add on a little bit for your exercise. It's critical that you get exercise because Dr. Wray mentioned this before. Exercise is absolutely essential for weight maintenance, for people to keep weight off. And people who do that successfully exercise about 30 minutes a day. But if you have a general idea and you don't mind doing a little bit of calorie counting, you can pretty easily estimate how many calories you need per day by using some online energy calculator, total energy expenditure calculator. And that should give you an idea of what it just takes for you to maintain your weight. But in general, a lot of people, you don't have to do this long term. Over time, you should work this out by experience, by maybe just weighing yourself once a week and kind of figuring out, when you put on weight, what might have led to that, and then, when you take off weight, what might have led to that. So that's kind of my general advice for people.
There are a lot of equations online for calculating your caloric requirement. It can also be measured with a breathing machine over a course of about 10 minutes in a fasting state, measuring how much oxygen you use and how much carbon dioxide you give out. But you need to go to a specialty office for that. But so you find out what you plug in numbers online, gives you an idea. You shouldn't calorie restrict by more than 500 calories a day. And that comes out, there's 3,500 calories in a pound. So that comes out to a weight loss of about a pound a week if you're trying to lose weight. Right? And people expect more than that because they're seeing it, advertised in this multi-billion-dollar dieting industry that wants to prey on people's suffering and is not telling you honest information. So if you create more than a 500 calorie deficit a day, you will train your body to survive on less calories. It's like a pendulum winding back this way. You're going to go back to your set point, sometimes even more, and gain more back. That's why restrictive dieting is so problematic. So calorie awareness, you have to be, one of the best things you can do about calorie awareness is look and see what's in the restaurants where you're eating. If you're eating out more than once a week, it's going to be difficult not only to lose weight, but to maintain a weight loss. You can't rely on our culture to feed you. You must bring your food, to the workplace and plan to eat your meals at home. So calorie, we need to know what's in stuff. We need awareness, but calorie counting has not been shown to result in sustainable weight loss.
Okay.
But if you got that half a plate of vegetables, your calories are going to fall into place.
All right. Got about 3 minutes left. I have to get to these gadgets that we all have and wear. Are they effective? Are they tools? The Fitbits of the world and, all of that. And, does that help? Is that a fad like everything that you've described in some of the dieting?
It's an open question. There was a big study that came out about a year ago that actually showed that people who used the Fitbits actually didn't do as well in terms of their energy intake. But I think that really depends on the individual. And I think for some people those can be incredibly motivating. And so I think, for the right person, I definitely advocate those. I wouldn't buy one expecting that to be a cure-all, that you have that, so that's going to be, but if you're the type of person that's, very goal-oriented, that could be a really great tool for you to make sure you're getting the activity that you need.
Feedback always helps. Yeah, I wish I had stock in them, but I don't. But the feedback helps, but it is kind of a fad thing. But if people are getting those 10,000 steps a day that we're trying to get, that's what the human body needs, that's a good thing.
Okay. In your final statement, again, that takeaway moment that folks can maybe start tomorrow in a fresh way, from your vantage point, Dr. Wray, what would you suggest for people watching tonight?
You take care of what you value. So if you're not taking good care of you got to really look at that value system. Do it because you're worth it, not because you're criticizing your body.
That is a motivational thing, like you said. I understand from your patient load that that's part of what makes you special in the practice. Thank you, Dr. Wray. And Dr. Keller?
I'll just say, getting sleep, learning to enjoy life, enjoy what you eat, managing stress, physical activity, and stop fad diets and restrictive dieting.
We still have about a minute left, so I do want to just kind of wrap this all, because we've talked a lot about the diet and nutrition and the exercise component. So to learn more about what your specific practices are, I understand, of course, they get referrals from your physician if you're located within the Mount Nittany Physician Group. Is that right, Dr. Wray?
Yes, I like to work through the family doc, so any changes, we're keeping that communication going, because the family doc is the gatekeeper of health for the individual.
That's great. And your research continues on.
We do. We're starting up a study now with 7 to 8-year-olds, so we'd love to have community members and get a chance to talk with you more.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us tonight. I'd like to thank again our guests, Kathleen Keller, Associate Professor with the Department of Nutrition and Food Sciences at Penn State's College of Health and Human Development, and Dr. Virginia Wray, a bariatric medicine specialist at Mount Nittany Physician Group. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Carolyn Donaldson. For all of us here at WPSU, thank you and good night.